I thought were working and they didn't work, and so I got lost in the Zoom world, but here I am. Thank you so much for having me.
Did you have anything you want to show on the screen?
I
In terms
do.
of pictures? Okay.
I do. I have a PowerPoint I can use, and I can do share screen whenever you're ready.
Okay, so EJ, if you could please make Ms. Gilfillan a co-host.
Yes, we're live, Dr. Jenkins. We can start.
Okay, very good. Very good. Larry, I think I'll just take it from here. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm very grateful to greet you again on our Stopping the Violence program. We're looking today at a very, very interesting angle of the topic, stopping the industrial jail complex development. And we're very happy to welcome Ms. Joy Gilfillan. To introduce her today, I'd like to have one of the special advisors for the Universal Peace Federation, Mr. Larry Krishnek, who will be introducing our guest speaker. Go ahead, Larry. And unmute, please.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Joy. This has been a whirlwind experience with Joy Gilfillan. I first met her 2 weeks ago. She is working with Irene Morgan, and they are with the Restorative Community Organization. And she found out about a program that we were having, a World Summit Retrospective here in Ferndale, Washington. And she called me up, contacted me, and my wife and I met with her and Irene. And we talked for an hour and a half, had a fascinating discussion. And then they came to our summit, a World Summit program in Ferndale, Washington, Saturday, which was an excellent, well-attended program. And at that time, she met Ray McCready, who's our executive director of UPF in Washington. And boy, things just went so fast, and suddenly we're here, and Joy is our primary speaker. So I'm excited that someone representing our community and is such a great advocate for real rudimentary peacemaking could participate. So thank you, Joy.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. Ms. Joy Gilfillan, President, Restorative Community Coalition, Bellingham, Washington. Welcome, Joy. You have all the time you need to present, and I understand you're going to share a PowerPoint with us. So please go ahead. Welcome. We welcome you. We're thankful for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to stop sharing here really quick. Is this being recorded? I hope.
Yes,
okay,
it is.
Good. Awesome. Okay. Then I would like to start by saying it was an absolute pleasure to come to your conference the other day and to see how much dedication there is to bring peace in a world that's in deep conflict. And it's interesting to me that oftentimes our coalition hasn't been invited to speak where people are trying to bring peace, because many people don't want to talk about the conflict. And especially when you're talking about the conflict having to do with criminals and criminal justice and mass incarceration, it is a very uncomfortable topic, and people don't want to talk about it because it is very close to our hearts in America that we stand for freedom. The irony is freedom has an upside down growth curve in America, because what we've done is we've become a country that makes a lot of money on war. And the feeder system, the marketing system that feeds into the war machine is the prison industrial complex and the oil industries. And before that is the jail industry that's feeding our children into the school to prison pipeline, which then feeds the prison industrial complex, which then feeds the oil and gas and war machines, which then feeds the destruction of our planet. And all of this violence is pretended to be the fault of the people at the bottom of the heap, the people who are condemned, the people who are actually causing the distress in the street, the protesters, the homeless, the broken. And that's a cover up for what's actually happening, because what I've learned, I want to talk specifically about the stop the punishment, or stop the violence idea, because what I've discovered by 13 years of working with Irene is that violence starts at the top, not at the bottom. People follow leaders. We all follow leaders. We're trained from before we're even born, or while during the process of birth, after we're born, we're trained to follow the people who protect us, who take care of us, who lead us. And we are trained through our entire school system, through our entire media, through everything we do, to follow leaders. And when you don't follow leaders, you get in trouble. You flunk out, you don't get the grade, you don't graduate, you don't meet the standards of the parents who want to fund you. And then in the nonprofit world, if you're not funded, that means you're not doing the right thing, and so you're supposed to yield. And it was really an upside down story that I walked into as the founder of or not as the founder, but with the founder of the Restorative Community Coalition, and started working with her to diagram out this upside down system that we've got. And I want to show you specifically a chart that we sort of shared the other day, which wakes people up to this interesting paradigm shift. I've got it on the screen. Can you guys see my Prison Policy Initiative document?
No.
I shared it, I thought.
You did before. I think you can unshare and then,
Oh, so I was sharing it before?
yeah, it showed up for a moment. Open your PowerPoint again so that it's the main thing. You don't have to make it full presentation mode.
How about that?
There you go. Yep.
Okay. So this is the Prison Policy Initiative, and a friend of mine, Ilona Krohn, who's from Germany, we invited her to Whatcom County, Washington, to give us an analysis of economic problems that we've got, because we actually have another chart that I'm going to show you, which shows how the economies of the world are actually controlling the domination system, which is fed by this prison industrial complex. And what's heartbreaking is when you take these people, the Prison Policy Initiative, they took all of the United States and separated them as if each one of them was a country, and then ranked them relative to all the other countries of the world to see what the incarceration rate was.
Shocking.
And what's interesting is when you first read this, it looks like there's only 20 countries that are worse than the other countries of the world. But when you realize that this yellow line is the United States itself as a whole aggregate, we're still way up in the list. But if you actually count down, before we hit El Salvador and Turkmenistan and Rwanda and Cuba and Thailand and Panama, and then we get down to Costa Rica, Uruguay, Brazil, Belarus, and Minnesota, the country Minnesota, and then Turkey. There are 35 countries, as in United States, that all rank higher per 100,000 population. 34 United States, as calculated by countries. And our arrest and incarceration rate of taking away freedom in America as a commodity, as a business enterprise, we arrest 1,094 people in Louisiana per 100,000 people. And the top 19 are all in southern states. But here we go, from 1,094 people down to, when we finally stop arresting people, it's 275 per 100,000. But then watch this, keep your eyes on the screen and watch how many countries are below the last state in America. And at the bottom is Central African Republic, 16 per 100,000. Guinea-Bissau, I don't even know where that is, 10 per 100,000. Nigeria, 31 per 100,000. Ghana, 42 per 100,000. Pakistan, 40 per 100,000. Where is Korea? I don't even know where it is on this chart. If I was a good preparedness person, I should have figured it out here. Somebody sees it, let me know. China, look at China, 121 per 100,000.
South Korea was 105.
South Korea, 105 per 100,000. That is what I want to show about that. So once we do that, we have to go back and look at who we are and how we can make changes in the world. And what I have here is a visual that we have to heal the valiant heart. And in order to heal the valiant heart, this is a model that I built to understand how humans work naturally. And we actually are naturally loving humans. And this was a blueprint of what I drew at one point, or I had someone draw it for me. Humans actually innately love. That's what we do. We innately love. And we innately know how to care for our planet. We innately know how to care for our children. We grow our children once they are first born. We grow them from little itty bitty, codependent, 100% codependent little babies. And we love them and we kiss them and we nurture them and we grow them because we love. We have hands to love. And yet, when we get twisted up out of fear, we create the opposite of that. And that creation of the opposite, I've turned into a navigation process to say what's wrong with our nation that we are creating this shame, blame, trauma game, and how do we get out of it? And there is a pattern we can follow. And the difference is we have to stop the process of pretending that we have to feed fear as a business model. And we actually need to recognize what's flipping the switch and turning us off. And it's the fear of persecution. It's the fear of becoming the victim. It's the fear of being vulnerable, of accidents. So the fear of being hurt is actually our very vulnerability that is exploited in violent systems to create war. So we strike first. We have a choice. We can change. This is the body, mind, spirit, the say is the triunity. It's about learning to protect our loved ones and ourselves, learning to protect what it is that we believe to be true. And I believe that nature is true. I believe that nature does not hold grudges and hate. It doesn't go to war with humans. It's naturally decomposing and growing and changing. And so the spirit is our desire to bring love. So I just want to say that building, leading, and innovating is the alternative to that. And one of the things that I learned, and I'll just take a couple more minutes here, but what I've learned is that we've created a habit pattern. This is actually a pattern that shows the deconstruction, the depreciating results when we choose to blame, shame, and game people. When people make mistakes, let's say there's a 911 call. When people make mistakes, they need help. They actually need compassion. They don't need more lawsuits and crime and fighting. They need help to deal with the grief and the shame and the fact that they may have hurt someone. But instead of doing that in America, we arrest whoever it was, isolate them, put them inside a jail, and then we start the lawsuits to figure out who's going to get the money out of the deal. And we create conflict. And in the creating of that, we create mass cost and mass punishment. And then we teach this in our philosophies. We actually talk in our addiction systems about the Cartman drama triangle, the persecutor, rescuer, victim. This is the same story as we have the good guy, bad guy, victim story that is used to drive most of our media. Like who's to blame? Who's to blame? Let's go back in our conspiracy and figure out who did it. It's not about that. But we use this shame blame game to entrap people into emotional hurt. And then that drives what is called the Galtung. Galtung is a philosopher who actually built this story of cultural, direct, and structural violence that's running our world. And he then put this into this triad, this one here that talks about direct violence, structural violence, and cultural violence.
Hmm.
I added in here that we have power, privilege, and prestige. And those things, when they're put under compression, which is what we have in the world right now, we create narcissistic, psychopathic, and Machiavellian behavior,
Hmm.
which actually drives this trauma. And this is where it comes back around. This is why I learned all this. I didn't learn this because I'm smart. I learned it because I was curious. What is driving all these stories in the bullies and the behavior that's happening right now in our country? And all the police violence and the defund the police, and then the police fight back, and then we have a fight on Capitol Hill, and then we have a fight in Bellingham. I sat back and looked at it and said, what happens to people at 911? And I found out that all we do today, simply since technology got loose on us, technology has made it scarier than ever for any self first responder to go to the scene of an accident. We record everything that happens. We track everything that happens. And what that does is it makes the first responders afraid of lawsuits. So who do they send? They send the cop first. As soon as you send a cop to a suicide call, or you send a cop to a place where people are in conflict, what happens? Everybody gets afraid. And then people do stupid things. And then we arrest them and we put them in jail. We isolate them and we perpetuate the very trauma that causes us to get in trouble. And so now we have escalating rates of trauma. We have escalating fear that happens in the public. I've got now in Whatcom County, and I'll stop with this and then open up questions. But in Whatcom County, I have young people in the college who tell me I don't call the cops for anything, even if I'm in trouble. Because if I call them, I'm the one that's going to get arrested. Because that's what happens often. And that fear perpetuates more and more danger. So one of the things that I started to do to stop this mass incarceration of people in Whatcom County, because that's what's happening, is people get afraid at the border, because that's what we talk about. They get afraid of the bullies. They get afraid of the homeless. They get afraid of whoever's protesting. And so we think that building walls and putting people inside the walls is going to protect us. Doesn't protect us. It makes it worse, because you know what it costs to build a jail? You know what it costs to erect walls and hire more police? You know what? It is so much cheaper to just go talk to people and solve the problem human to human. So there's a lot more I could say, but that's enough for right now. I'm going to stop sharing and I will answer any questions that you guys have. Are you guys there?
Yeah, we're here. I don't know what happened to Dr. Jenkins.
Yes, yeah, we're here.
Okay.
Yeah, Irene, I see your hand up. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, please go ahead. Let's have question
You
and
need to
answer. and
unmute
comments.
yourself.
There I go. Tried a couple times. Good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased that we're able to do this today. And thank you, Joy, for doing such a good job. However, I do want to correct one statement that you made regarding that first chart, the gray one with the United States, the 34th down or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Those are not the numbers that are designated there, are not number of arrests. They're the number of people in our prisons.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Joyce misstated that they were arrests. They are the number of people in our prisons per 100,000 capita.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, Joy, one thing I would like to say right away, we thank you. This is an important area of understanding, especially when you compare the rate of incarceration in the United States to the rest of the world. It would be different if we were, right in sync with most of the world, but it's massively more incarceration in the United States. It's fundamentally a big problem.
Yes.
We do some work with Congressman Danny Davis out of Chicago, who's kind of become one of the leaders on the ex-offenders, reentry programs. But tell us more. How can we reverse this? Because I think, where does crime come from? And you're talking about, well, it doesn't come from the, humble people in the community. It's coming from above. Can you explain that a little more? How is this system? And I saw what you're informing us with the conflict and the attitudes of retribution, and it's very, very true, very true. We've created a culture of conflict in Congress and everywhere, and there's no pathway of dialogue. Many times it's kind of like adversarial, and the main objective: defeat your enemy and then set up what you want, and that doesn't work. We are in a situation of really serious breakdown in all of our communities. So what can be the first steps to move away from this?
So let me answer that question, because I built models. I don't like to talk about misery unless I have some relief. What's the way out? If you're going to talk about what's hurting you, it's a good idea to figure out how are you going to get away from the hurt. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to answer the question in a couple different ways, because one of them was, what is the learning curve? How did I diagram it? But what's the way out? And the third one is, how do we fix it? Okay. So the first one is, if fear is the thing that's taking you out of the game, what is the opposite of fear? Many people will say it's love. It's my proposition that didn't prove to be true when I did my analysis, because love can be the motivation for fear and for killing. So love is actually all that is. It's the wholeness of all of it. So in my experience, and this is very practical, you can be standing on the side of a cliff and be terrified and fall off the cliff. You can also be standing on the side of the cliff, and if you got the right umbrellas and things around you and the harness and things, you can fall off the cliff and experience total and complete joy. So why is it that perfectly good, healthy people will jump out of helicopters to save somebody in a storm when the storm is raging and someone was stupid enough to go out in their boat and get themselves in a pickle, and good guys will jump out of airplanes to go save them? Like, it's because the thrill at the end of the life-saving mission, it was so thrilling to have saved somebody and gone through the trauma. So the very thing that creates strength, if used properly, is thrilling. The thing that creates strength, if it's used improperly, creates death. Okay, so I started looking at that, and I built models, and that goes back to this joy triangle thing that I was talking about. But I realized that if in fear we have persecutor, victim, and rescuer, and then you look at the body, the mind, and the spirit, or the triunity of life, okay, and you look at that as the wholeness, when you are in love, optimally held in integrity, the opposite that can bring life to a fearful situation is joy energy. And that's not because it's my name. In fact, I tried not to use it for a long time because people thought it was about my ego. It's not. It's about the joy of salvation, the joy of helping people, the joy of doing things well is the energy that will propel people who are broken off the couch to help somebody else. And in fact, there's a shame thing that happens down here at the bottom, and I may get to that in a minute. But right at the bottom of a pivot, when you are in most shame, the only thing that will allow somebody to get off a couch when they're depressed is the valiant heart. It's to stand up for somebody that does not deserve to be beaten. And people will stand up at the base to get off the couch to not go into depression. So one of the things that I built was this conditioning triangle model. And this is a PDF, so I'm not going to be able to make it bigger. But what I basically did is I started looking at the conditioning triangle, and I said, instead of the persecutor, victim, rescuer, what are the roles that you play when you're in high performance, joyful energy? When you're doing the right thing, taking the right action, you become a builder, a leader, and an innovator. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely.
you simply switch hats. I mean, that's it. It's like you can do this from the center of your forward thinking motion. You can do it from your heart. You can do it with your feet and your hands. So you become the builder who organizes and provides solutions instead of becoming the
Absolutely.
persecutor who breaks things down. You change and become the leader who develops and produces results instead of the victim who's scheming and praying to figure out how to get your advantage. You switch from being the rescuer and the enabler and the parasite to being the person who innovates so that people don't have to be rescued in the first place. And you integrate and protect and you help people who are broken to be well enough so they can start leading their own life, so they can build their own world, so you can go back and you can start doing it from the productive side. So that's part of the answer. When we look at this misbehavior down here, when we get hooked in the negative, this is the stuff that causes us trauma. So you can look at this. Now, what caused me to go here was this particular picture. I started to look at the economics of the world. The people who are actually creating most of the war are your imperial forces. They're the guys who are the overcast system running the money game. And the middle caste is all of us in the middle who are subject to the rules and regulations, the structural problem of the money system. And then underneath it, we end up with the undercast, the people who are cast out. And all of this, I actually created this idea of fear. Fabricated evidence appearing real is what's used in our fake systems to manipulate us. So I see a hand go up, Raymond. I'd love to talk with you about that, because then I can talk more deeply about this other part. Go ahead, Raymond.
So Ray McCready, you have a good question here. Why don't you go ahead and ask Joy?
Sure,
about
yeah.
what she proposes.
It helps me to write stuff out. I was asking Joy, what do you propose to do about those people and with those people who have used violence on their fellows out of emotion or worse in pursuit of their own gain, regardless of the cost to their fellow humans?
Well, you have to ask a few questions first. You know, both the people who have created trauma typically create trauma and pain and suffering on others because they originally were at pain and trauma. So you have to actually invite the questions. Like when we started working in the Reentry Coalition, Irene started looking at it as like everybody else, we started looking at the shame blame game, who caused the pain, and we started working to help the people who were injured rectify and get punishment, get compensation for what happened to them. Like that we work from the victim stand and we said, oh, those people need to be punished. Well, the people who are coming out of prison and out of jail had already been punished according to law. But the fact is, when they come out, they then carried a record and lifetime punishment for the rest of their life. So how are we going to turn those people back into human productive organisms to help the community? How do they ever actually get redemption if they can never get back to work? Because one of the things I discovered working with people inside the prison system or that were coming out of the prison system, you know what their biggest hurt was? When I asked them, I said, so how can we help you? Like, how do we actually help you get back into the system? You've already paid for your crime according to the law. You've already been condemned and you made it through and you came out. Now what? And they said, I would just like to say I'm sorry to the people who I hurt. I never was allowed to do that. And when I discovered that happened universally, our system stops people from being able to say they're sorry. Because if in our system you even say you're sorry, then you're guilty. There's a presumption of guilt if you say you're sorry. So what's interesting is in Europe, in England, a friend of mine, Ian Lewis, actually got Parliament to pass a law that says if you say you're sorry, that doesn't mean you're guilty. It just says you're sorry that something happened that was bad. and it relieved all kinds of problems in England. Very interesting. It changed the legal structure.
Thank you, Joy. Kathy Morphopoulos would like to make a comment, and then Catherine Duncan, I'd like to have you come and ask your question and comment. Go ahead, Kathy.
Good morning. So my question is, of all of your graphs that I think were the most powerful is that graph where you're showing the relationship between the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Mhm.
And I think part of what's happened in the United States is the medicalization of things that are actually spiritual problems. So what you have is we had COVID, right? So what are we doing with COVID? We isolate everybody, then everybody's mentally ill.
Yeah.
And instead of having the churches step into that band, which is the proper place for all of our different religions in the United States, all of a sudden, suddenly it's constantly promoted in the news of people are becoming less religious and people aren't going to church, etc. It's almost like this is our future. So now we've got these telemarketing, or not telemarketing, but where you teleconference and you say stuff like, I feel depressed. And the end of this thing, you're given a drug.
Yes.
So the pharmaceutical solutions are not working. And
Right.
we somehow or another are failing to realize that connection between the spirit, right, which is really the driver of everything, is being put to a lower status. So I don't believe personally that leadership comes from our government. I think the leadership should be coming from our churches, from other areas. But when you get to the government level, as I've been working for the last couple of years with what's happening with cannabis, you get mixed in with, they want to do the right thing by people that were hurt by the war on drugs. I get that. But they're swinging it over to where are all these drug shops being placed? They're being placed in areas that can't tolerate any more troubles, but that's where they're being placed. So where I'm going with this is, I truly believe that leadership is like the people that are on this call, and less wondering if we're going to get into leadership at the top level, because if there's one thing America is, it's friendly to business. So without arguing that point, we're very friendly to business, but we've moved way, way too much into the solutions that are medicalizing spiritual problems and putting the churches on the defensive, which is, I think we should just honestly just ignore all of the attacks on, pretending that it's separation of church and state. And we've allowed the pharmaceutical and the medical industry to almost overwhelm the spiritual health of United States. Thank you.
So may I respond to that?
Oh, of course, yes.
I think it's absolutely, you just stuck your finger on one of the biggest problems there is, but not in the way that you're thinking about it, in my opinion. Okay. My study of it is that leadership comes from within. It doesn't come from without. It is a false story that governments are leaders. No, governments are actually some of the biggest predators there are, because they use structural violence to control people. So the same thing is true with the money companies and the big pharma. Big pharma is driven by a money profit. Okay. Yeah. And if you start looking at many churches as well, as in the Vatican, for example, one of the things that it did, and so this all goes back to, I started studying all of these because for me, it's not about who's right and wrong. It's how do we solve the problem? Yeah. The whole thing is about how do we actually get below the radar to humans who love. So, and I don't know what one of you guys probably does. Irene is famous for saying, your belief systems are the things through which all else follows. So your original belief in us as loving humans, if we presume that humans are not loving and they are destructive and we have to protect ourselves from other humans because they're evil and bad. So therefore we have to arm ourselves and we have to build companies. That entire, this whole story is a false belief system at its core, which is actually, Kathy, what you're talking about. It's the spirit of the soul, right? So whatever church you want to wrap it up in, I wrap mine up in nature, you know, the life force energy that we have, that is our divinity in our heart, is in fact the thing that controls us. And when we can start to recognize that it is not these false leaders, this is the false evidence appearing real story that I just talked about. It's the false ethos, it's the false evidence, it's the false emotions, it's the false egos, it's the false environmental systems, it's the false everything. That stuff is all up here. It's all mental story that is used to allow us to be manipulated, stolen from, betrayed, and go to war over. So I want to bring it back to leadership is from within. And when we can go there, we can start to change the systems that are dominating us. So is that
Catherine
helpful?
Duncan, yes, very good. Catherine Duncan from Las Vegas, who's a great ambassador for peace. Catherine, you had a very important comment and question.
Yes, I did. And thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins. I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's a conversation that we have been having for quite some time now here at the Harrison House. And it's great to hear things from a Eurocentric viewpoint. But however, we need to look, I think, beyond human violence, because as you know, I've started Bible school, Dr. Jenkins, and in that, I've done a lot of reading, and I've seen violence in humans from the very beginning. And there's been all kinds of violence. I mean, you see sword fights and sacrifices, and I mean, violence just seems to be something that humans do. But I think the type of violence that we're talking about now is the unique violence that America has, which is another set of violence above our normal human violence. And that's the violence that the Black people in this country are being subjected to today. And I say that because if you look at the statistics from Louisiana, there's 67% of those in prison, I believe, are Black. And overall in the country, nearly 40% of people in prison are Black people, and we only make up 13% of the population. Some statistics out of Sandy Hooks, and it said the children aged 15 to 24, while they only make up 2% of the population, are involved in 40% of the gun violence. So clearly, what's happening in America has to do with our situation here in America. And while I can harp on America being built on racism, we have to get to where we are now with Blacks in America, look at our current condition, figure out why we're in this condition, and then go about using the recommendations that Reverend Sung Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon have given us, a blueprint and a set of recommendations on how to move forward. The reason how I got involved in this organization in the first place is because Reverend Moon came to America to solve racism. And everything he said was dear to my heart. And every word he spoke about our situation just compelled me to become more and more of a unificationist, because I was a Black woman who was feared by most people because they saw me as an angry Black woman even as I approached them. And so while Dr. Gilfian talks about love being the basis of understanding fear, you have to understand that we, the slave descendants in America, were stripped of our ability to love ourselves. So once we know that we're dealing with a group of people who don't know who we are, we don't know, we struggle with being African Americans. We struggle with being Black. We have yet to find an identity that makes us true Americans, so that we can be proud of what we become in America. And so I follow myself. I've learned to love myself finally. Thank you very much to all of my able sisters and brothers. Now I'm able to love on my neighbors a little bit better. And we're looking for ways to bring about a better environment here in our Las Vegas community. And we're doing it by following the roadmap that Reverend Moon put down for us, and that's to create a city of peace here in Las Vegas. So with that, I just want to let you know how grateful I am that such an organization exists, has grown out of Reverend Moon's teachings. This Universal Peace Federation is a tremendous organization. Just last week, Ms. Leslie Rigney did such a tremendous job of connecting us with our African sisters and brothers, because we've had a lot of dissension between us and Africa. And I don't want to take up all the time from your wonderful panel, but I just want to let you know that I'm thrilled to be part of this organization, anxious to move forward, and look forward to welcoming you to a city of peace in Las Vegas. Thank you. Thank you.
So may I speak to that also, Michael? For some reason, I've got mute on you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Joy.
Okay. So what's interesting about all of these different stories is I've got a couple of connections to you, Catherine, and I really appreciate it. Some of the people from Las Vegas came to Whatcom County a few years ago to talk about bringing peace and a lot of the good things that they were producing out of Vegas. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm familiar with a little bit of what you're doing there. And I'm really proud to see that the Universal Peace Foundation Federation is doing the work that you're doing. It's incredible. And I agree with that. Part of the Black and the racism story is very interesting. I spent quite a bit of time studying what's happening with racism in America. And as a white woman working to try to help the prisoners and the criminalized in America, it was fascinating to find how fast Irene and I, she's a white woman too, and we were immediately extinguished from all conversations about bringing people to America, including by the Black women and the Asian women and all the people who were healers. And it didn't matter, the religious people, everybody said, you're not welcome here. You don't have the right to talk. And I sat and I looked at that for a long time because I couldn't figure out if I'm supposedly one of the externalized, and yet we're also supposed to be the white privileged women. And I'm sitting here looking at all of it, and I'm from Europe. I'm not from America, but I don't know anything about so I went down to a restorative justice conference, and it was hosted by some people who were from New Zealand who were talking about restorative justice from the Native American standpoint. But it was put on by a bunch of people from the POC community. So there were all the Blacks, and there were the whites, and there were the Asians, and there were all these people. And for the first time, I sat in a meeting where they put us all separate according to our race to talk about restorative justice and harm. And I went, wow, this is just fascinating. Because I realized that punishment and abuse, which is where you started the conversation, is part of our life history as a human species. So then I started looking at that one. I went, well, but there's a lot of human species that are not violent and they are not brutalized. And that's not a true story of the entire race of humans. So where did this slavery and the abuse and where did all this punishment start? And it took me back to the doctrine of discoveries, which is interesting because it took me back to study under Stephen Newcomb, who is a Native American elder here, who did some conversation about the origin of words like civilization. And then I went and I studied, so he's Native American. He was talking to me about the doctrine of discoveries, which by the way, was written as Papa Bowles back in the, way back 800 to 2000 years ago. There was a whole movement towards civilization out of agrarian society. So then I started looking at that. And then I was introduced to Paul McGreedy and what it's like as a Native American human who this guy was Jewish, who came out of Europe, and the Jews were chased around all over the place. And there was all this other stuff. And so this Jewish fellow who was Sephardic Jew did a whole history of humanity way back when. And then he gave me another perspective. And then I went and talked to one of my Native people friends who's from the Lummi Nation. And he did an entire story about the doctrine of discoveries and how the doctrine of discoveries actually preceded the mass enslavement of the Black people in America as part of the follow-up from the doctrine of discoveries.
May I interject one thing there? And
Sure.
I think this is a part of American history that got lost.
Yes.
We all know how people were kidnapped from the African soil and brought to America to be slaves. The
Sure.
part of history that America doesn't talk about, America allowed humans to be bred for sale.
Yes.
So America created people and sold people on the market. So imagine if you take Dr. North Shelton does his best. He says, if you take a Rottweiler, which is an African, and you mate it with a German Shepherd, which is European, what is the result of that mate between that Rottweiler and the German Shepherd? You get a new breed.
Mm-hmm.
You get a new culture. So America created a new breed of people. And I often tell people, my last name is Duncan. You look at me, you think I'm African American, but I am Scottish and Irish in my brain.
Yes.
So you don't see the Scottish Irish in me because that's the value system that was bred into us as a people.
Mm-hmm.
So we were bred to be obedient, subservient, and docile people, strong, but yet no intelligence.
Okay.
So the offsprings of those people, their descendants and their offsprings are the most the less educated people in America. Let's just say the most ignorant people in America, because we've never been educated as to who we are, and the school systems that we're in don't necessarily prepare us for America's systems.
Sure.
So our children are creating terror on America because they don't know who they are. They have no value system other than television, Hollywood. So how then do we expect a culture of people who are brought up in a country with only European value systems that taught them to hate themselves? How do they function in today's society without having any divine principles whatsoever? How do we expect that to happen?
So
So we don't get a set of principles. It's like we have to erase that hard drive and reprogram these young people so they have a set of principles to live by. And so I think it's we got a whole culture of people that have bad programming from television and Hollywood.
So I would 100% agree with all that you're talking about. And I have another basis, though, to look at before that started. And the reason is because, and I want to show you this slide, if I might, because there's some things on this slide that you'll be able to read that I don't have time to talk about. But it will help to understand that I am 100% preconditioned beliefs and training and crossbreeding. I grew up on a farm, so I crossbred animals for life, right? And I got championships for some of them. And I looked back because that's why I went and talked to the Native American fellow. That's why I went and talked to the Jewish fellow. That's why I went to Europe to talk to the women, to a woman who was born and bred in the, her family was born and raised during the Holocaust. And I've been talking to all these different people for me to understand how this mass incarceration of humans in America became such a disease. It's a cultural created disease that is making money on the richest, on the poorest people, and they're using them and they're running them through a meat grinder for profit. So how do I turn the system around without judging the humans as good or bad, but just as humans who love? How do loving people create these sick systems? What happened that happened? So I went back in time. I was following this doctrine of discoveries because before America created the mass incarceration and this mass slavery system, we used to live in Europe. And the Black people used to live in Africa and other countries. And what happened before all that happened? And what I recognized is that the doctrine of discoveries was written in the 12th century. And it was written on purpose. Actually, what I should look up is I'll just tell you, there's a thing you can go watch. It's called The Doctrine of Discoveries. And there's a book written that's called Pagans in the Promised Land. And it will talk about how a Catholic emperor, Constantine, wrote a decree to the king. He wrote a piece of paper. I mean, this is so insane because it's where we went from being an agrarian, loving, living society that lived off the earth and sang and danced and loved and created to becoming this cultured, civilized society that became greedy and mean and violent. Like, what happened that happened? And when this emperor decided to write a piece of paper and parchment and put a seal on it, and he sent it off to the King of Portugal, for example, the King of Portugal was then given permission to hire people who were admirals to sail across the sea to land on new territory in the Americas and in Africa. And as long as they went there and that land was not previously owned by the Catholic Church, and there was no Catholic there that had been baptized, then they had the legal right, according to this document, to say that all those people who were there were heathens. But they could enslave people and give them the right to own people. And so the blacks actually became a higher class than the Native American heathens, who could be raped, pillaged, torn, owned, traded, done whatever they wanted, and they could steal all their goods. And as long as they brought their goods back to the king, then the Pope would forgive them all, as long as they made enough money. And that was a really interesting thing, because then I started studying on how did that happen, what happened that happened. And the sadness is we've built entire economic systems that are based on this model of commercial domination, religious control by a specific group of people, and structural control of our court systems, which then gave permission for all this stuff that you're talking about to happen. And that was heartbreaking for me when I actually saw that it was just over a stupid piece of paper that was sealed. And then they said, oh, these particular Christian people could give forgiveness, but nobody else could. And this whole thing, it screwed up all of our religions, it screwed up our business, it screwed up all of this. It's incredible. I can't hear you, Michael, for some reason.
Yeah, Dr. Jenkins, your sound, do you want to call in with your sound, or you're unmuted, but somehow, okay. He's got it. He's done this before.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay.
Yes, go for it.
Joy, we really want to thank you. I mean, your perspective is very important, because it helps open up a whole different area of understanding. Our incarceration is off the charts.
Yes.
Our rehabilitation system doesn't work.
Mm-mm.
And there's so many factors, and you're hitting on many of them. So we really appreciate you, and we would like to work together to find the way to really properly address crime, and to also prevent crime, like you've also mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, prevention is far less expensive than
Yeah.
trying to punish and then rehabilitate. So, but at the same time, we respect also the efforts made to try to keep people alive in our communities when there's a gun battle going on. So
Absolutely.
I think that, we have a lot to learn, a lot to discuss, but I'd like to just give you a moment for final comments. I know Daryl Franklin had a comment. Many others have comments. I'd like Daryl, you can give a final comment, and then I'd like to go back to Joy for her closing. And we thank you, Joy, and Ray McCready, and also, Mr. Krishnek. Can't thank you enough for introducing us to Joy. We'll have you back. Go ahead, Daryl. Final comment or observation, and then back to Joy, because unfortunately our time is up.
Yeah, thank you so much. I thank you, Joy. I really appreciate your presentation and everyone, your comments that you have given. And thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for allowing me to share some of these things that were made available from the conversation that we we're just having. And, it just seems as though that it's up to us to take responsibility for in creating a community to inspire the empowerment of the religious community to reclaim its moral authority, because we have also there's some external factors that showed up for me, and that is to say, I'm questioning whether or not the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower spoke about, and I'm wondering whether or not if that is having a factor in towards creating this, I guess you can say, the spirit of scarcity that seems to be the underlying component driving, I guess you can say, corporations for not really addressing the key issue. And so what we're having is a political conversation to address these concerns of our social environment, as opposed to leaving out the spiritual component or the underlying spiritual principles that will help us to be able to create the possibilities that are in alignment with our original mind.
Yep.
And so those are things that show up, and I can say more, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Daryl. Daryl, we need to have another session with Joy. I really appreciate that. She was very clear about mind, body, and spirit. And I think that's where we need to focus. It's long-term. Joy, again, thank you. And why don't you give your final remarks? And we just want to, close and look forward to being with you again.
My final remark is this: we're just humans and we love. It's very clear to me that that's what it is. And at the base of it, we are connected to the earth, which gives us life force, food, air, water to breathe. And on the backside of that, we create beliefs and stories that are then used to polarize us so that we can fight, so that the guys that run the money game or the domination system at whatever level, they can manipulate us. So whether it's a war between the masculine and the feminine, a war between races or classes or spiritual interest, they use that to manipulate us, and it becomes trauma bonding. And when you apply this to the jail industrial complex, those trauma bonds, the amount of money that's made on drugs, the amount of money that's made on all of this stuff is incredible. And so in order to reverse this, we have to go back to the peace that is within our own heart and learn to duplicate that. And you have to go back to the origin. Prevention is number one. If you're coming in at the backside trying to heal it and make money on punishment, it's expensive and it's costly to all of us in our soul. So if we want to fix the world, we have to get back over here and work on prevention coming out of the gate. And that's what the Restorative Community Coalition has been doing. That's what 16 years of Irene's research got me to pay attention to. And I've had to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the point that now I actually do love humans, even when we do the stupid stuff.
That's great. Ms. Joy Gilfillan, President of Restorative Community Coalition, Bellingham, we thank you. We thank you all sincerely. We'll be here next Tuesday with Reverend Oliver. Next Wednesday. Every Wednesday we're here at 2. Again, we can't thank you enough. And Joy put her connection point or her website and email in the chat. So EJ, please leave the chat open for another 3 or 4 minutes so people can get that information. I want to thank everybody for this program, and especially we look forward to the next one, Joy. We'll set up another one. We don't have to wait for Wednesdays, but Larry and Ray, let's put together even other additional things. This is a very big topic, very important topic. Thank you, everybody. Let's have a a week where we advance for loving other human beings and bringing some restoration to our communities. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellent
Thank
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks a lot, Joy. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Joy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Joy.
Irene.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you,
Daryl. Good to seeing you.
Thank you so
Hey.
much.
Thank
We'll see
you.
you again soon.
Everybody.
Hey.
Thank you,
Wow.
Joy.
I just
Keep
saw
up the
there's a
good work.
lot of you guys on
Very
here.
good.
All right. Here,
Wow,
Wayne.
that's fun.
Bless you, Joy. Carol. Come on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very nice.
Bless everybody.
Hey, there
Very
she
A lot
is.
of good comes out of Seattle.
Okay. Good to see you
Thank
again,
you.
Leslie.
Okay, you too, Daryl. God bless.
Leslie.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. You stay marvelous, you marvelous, intelligent human beings.
All right.
Very nice.
Wow, what a variety, what a rich variety of humanity here. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Together
true.
we can do it.
All right. Hallelujah. God made us that way.
That's true.
Did everybody get what they need out of the chat?
Didn't get the link,
Thank
the,
you.
the website information.
The
I'd
web,
love to have a copy of where this is aired because I actually would like to use this as an episode on my I Change Justice and actually broadcast you guys on I Change Justice if possible.
I
Who would
changed
I talk
yesterday.
to about that?
EJ is the one who runs this and he posts it.
Okay,
So we'll get with you through the people who contacted you to come.
awesome. Thank you so
Definitely.
much.
Yep,
And
every
I
week.
don't know.
I didn't get the website link. Is it available? I couldn't find it in the chat.
The restorativecommunity.org.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Restorative community.
Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Take care. Nice to see you,
bless.
John Dorowski.
Thanks again, Joy. God bless you.
Yeah, you're amazing. Thank you for your research.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, she's gone. Thank you.
Wow, that was one of the best ones ever.
I know, Irene, I'm so sorry you weren't able to, you had your hand up. Irene Morgan. Sorry we didn't get to you before you put your hand down. Okay, adios, everyone.
Bye, Nadia. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.